Elephants often mourn the death of a fellow member of their herds. Elephants seem to be very smart. Capuchin monkeys, when fed merely cucumbers, and other capuchin monkeys next to them are getting grapes, become visibly upset at the unfairness and the injustice. Laboratory rats, when freed from their cages, will attempt to free other rats if they can. A Chico, a famous Akita dog in Tokyo, waited for his master, Professor Ueno, every evening at a famous crossing and station, Shibuya Station, and did this for 10 years, and even did it after the professor's death. There are 2 statues in Tokyo commemorating this famous dog. Food requires rhesus monkeys to give another monkey a painful electric shock. They will resist having the food, sometimes going hungry for 12 days. Jane Goodall, famous primatologist, tells of Flint, a male chimpanzee who was very bonded to his mother, and when his mother suddenly died, he climbed a tree to a nest shared with his mother and refused food, stayed there for a month, and died. He was so upset. In 1996, in a Chicago area zoo, something amazing happened. A young child, a 3-year-old boy, slipped from his parents' hand and went down a chute and went into a pit where gorillas lived. When she saw this, an 8-year-old Western lowland gorilla named Benti Jua, who already had a baby gorilla clinging to her back, went over to the young boy, and the onlookers were horrified about what might happen. But instead of anything bad happening, she gently cradled the boy and took him over to a door where a male human attendant waited, and then she sauntered off. Are these moral actions? Can higher animals be moral in the same way as humans? That's the subject of today's episode of Great Stories of Bioethics, my personal YouTube channel. So I'm not only a bioethicist, I'm a philosopher, and if we ask, can animals be moral? Of course, I want to first ask, what do we mean by being moral? And defining key terms is what philosophers often do in a debate, because it helps us advance thinking to know exactly what we're talking about. And this goes back to Socrates when he asked generals, can you define courage? We don't want to beg any questions by assuming that only humans can be moral. We want to ask, well, what is it to be moral? And here we see some great divides in the history of philosophy. There are people like Kant who believe that only humans can be moral because they have a kind of soul and rationality and autonomy. They can logically think to universalize a maxim. But then there are other people like David Hume, Kant's contemporary, who believe that morality is basically a matter of what he called the sentiments, and there are natural sentiments and social sentiments. And Hume actually believed that humans shared the natural sentiments with higher animals, sentiments such as courage and perseverance, and even empathy. For Hume, they did not share the so-called social or artificial virtues of a sense of justice and manners. Later, Charles Darwin also famously argued, in his second book especially, The Descent of Man, that the gulf between humans and primates was smaller than the gulf between, say, primates and fish. And Darwin argued for basically a gradient view of moral emotions from the most primitive beings that were sentient and social up through invertebrates and mammals. He basically said he thinks it's a continuum. He did think that the humans had some social virtues that primates did not. There is actually a great deal of interest in the cognitive abilities of higher animals, and there's been a kind of revolution in the last decades, overcoming some of our speciesist assumptions about what animals can and cannot not do. And in this episode, I'm basically going to focus on whether or not animals can at all be moral. Basically, I'm going to answer yes. Of course, if they can be moral, then the way we handle them in laboratories, the way we use them in factory farming is problematic. But I'm going to put that aside and just focus on some of the debate about whether animals can be moral. One of the people we also want to look at, besides Hume and Darwin, is the great empiricist Dutch-born Frans de Waal, who spent 50 years studying animals, especially elephants and primates, and really advanced our understanding in a lot of ways about what animals were capable of. Frans de Waal taught us that especially elephants and primates are capable of using tools of conflict resolution, of empathy, in ways that were really kind of overlooked before. And there's actually a whole field studying animal cognition and sort of the evolution of moral emotions. The Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy has some really excellent articles and has a kind of map of all the different kinds of research about this. Highly recommend that. But let's go back to the question about what exactly do we mean by being moral. So, two candidates. One is giving reasons for your actions. Obviously, if you're just acting out of reflex or conditioning, it's not the same thing as what we mean by being moral. Can animals give reasons? Well, not for Kant, but again, let's not beg any questions about what counts as giving a reason. We don't want to say that the only way you can give a reason is by using language or writing. If we think of giving a reason as a calculation that's intentional, that involves the concern for another being, then it does seem that animals can give or have reasons for their actions in this way. Someone who's also explored this was the philosopher, one of my mentors, James Rachels. He wrote an excellent book called Created from Animals. There, Rachels makes some distinctions that I want to use also. First of all, we want to talk about whether animals can have moral status. And of course, because they can feel, and as Jeremy Bentham says, they should count in morality and our thinking because they're not just rocks or plants. Secondly, a very important distinction is between acting morally and being morally responsible. Obviously, primates, elephants aren't morally responsible is the same way as adult humans, but they're also not totally immune from moral responsibility. If my cat or dog acts badly or acts dangerously, they jump up on a near hot stove, I correct them. It's not necessarily a punishment, but it is holding them responsible and teaching them. They're more like children in some ways that we train. But we do think they can own some behavior. There are dogs that sometimes act ashamed for what they've done. If the dog has been left too long and urinated on the rug, it feels ashamed. So it certainly seems like dogs have moral emotions and make calculations about their behavior. So in terms of counting as acting morally, having reasons, making calculations, making intentions of care for others, it does seem like many animals can do so. The great sociobiologist from Alabama, E.O. Wilson, who grew up in the marshes of Mobile, wearing hip boats as a teenager. He actually discovered the fire ant, and who was the founder of sociobiology. He made a big stir when sociobiology was first published by arguing that we can actually generalize from the social behavior of ants to the social behavior of other animals, even humans. And people say, oh, this is impossible. We don't share anything with ants. But of course, we probably do. From the point of view of the universe, the social interactions of ants and the social interactions of humans may not be as far apart as we would like to think. Anyway, it just seems like a lot of animals can have reasons for their behavior. But what about a different lens on morality? What about care ethics, which basically says morality involves relationships within my circle of concern? You know, the limitation of care ethics is that a lot of us think morality has to do in medicine with strangers, But let's put that aside for a minute and say, let's suppose my primary focus, as some feminists would say, is the morality of the family, my neighborhood, my workplace, my tribe, my kin. Do animals fit in there? They certainly would seem to. Dogs, cats, horses certainly have a very strong relationship. If I'm walking my dog every morning and night on a routine and I don't, dog has an expectation in our relationship that I'll do this and gets mad if I don't. They certainly seem to fit well in a circle of care ethics. I think bioethics is interesting in a lot of ways because it's kind of an indirect way into some old philosophical questions. The question of animal cognition, the question of whether animals can be moral, is also a backdoor into the question of whether all humans can have moral status, and whether they have cognition. There are certainly some babies, born anencephalic babies with no higher brain, or probably never going to have a higher brain. There are some elderly adults with advanced dementia who are never going to have cognition. Certainly there are some chimpanzees, some pigs, who have more cognition than some humans. And so, as Peter Singer would argue, some non-human animals seem to have more moral status and relationship to us than some humans at the very edges of personhood. I think in general the conclusion is that Descartes was wrong. Animals are not unfeeling machines, and as many people have argued who are primatologists and study animal behavior, animals are much more like us than what we would like to admit, because we use them in terrible ways in factory farming and in experiments. We try to distance ourselves and think they're really different. Of course, this was a defense mechanism in slavery too. This, call people, enslaved people, subhuman. I'm going to quote Frans de Waal here, getting towards the end, and he says, "We start out postulating a sharp boundary between humans and apes, or between apes and monkeys, but in fact, we are dealing with sand castles that lose much of their structure when the sea of knowledge washes over them. The sand castles turn into hills, leveled ever more, until we are back to where evolutionary theory always leads us, a gently sloping beach." I think that's an interesting conclusion. To end, I want to just mention that in preparing for this episode, not only did I consult the Stanford Encyclopedia of Philosophy and its excellent article on animal cognition, I used a book of my first mentor, Peter Singer. This is the first edition signed of Peter Singer, Animal Liberation. I also used this excellent book by James Rachels, Created from Animals, great book subtitled The Moral Implications of Darwinism, where Jim argued that we really didn't get enough moral insights from Darwin as we could have. And finally, I stole the title of this episode from an excellent book by Mark Rowlands called Can Animals Be Moral? I hope you learned something from this episode. If you did, give me a thumbs up, share it. Thank you very much.